É um prazer enorme ter o Ondřej Mirtes aqui com a gente, que gentilmente está dedicando o seu tempo e o seu conhecimento conosco hoje. Tá? Para quem esteve vivendo dentro de uma caverna nos últimos anos, o Ondřej é o criador do PHP Stand, tá? É uma das ferramentas, provavelmente uma das ferramentas mais populares aí no nosso mercado. Tá? Então, Mr. Ondřej, thank you so much for being with us, for sharing your time and your knowledge. It's a real pleasure to have you with us today. And the stage, so to speak, is all yours, and have a good one. All right?
All right. Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be part of this conference across the world. It's still daylight here, but I think it will be getting a little darker throughout my talk. So I hope that you will still see me at the end because I don't have a light here. All right. So my name is Ondřej Mirtes, and I've been speaking at conferences since around 2011, but I've never been asked to give a keynote speech. Keynote speech isn't just yet another tech talk. It should be, in my opinion, something aspirational and motivating to set the tone for today. So I decided it's going to be about my career, the decisions I made that led me to what I do today, and possible takeaways from that for you. I had been employed in a web development agency for 4 years, and then in an e-commerce company for 6 years. But I was always jealous of independent developers with their own applications. Because for me, to be employed means that you are not working on your own creation, you don't have the final word on everything, and sometimes you need to do stuff that you don't agree with. On the other hand, when working for myself on my own product, I can set my own schedule, I can wake up when I want, I can take as much vacation as I want, and also I can work when I want and where I want. Waking up when I want is now a little bit complicated by the fact that I have children, but otherwise it's still true. It allows me to have a work-life balance, and I can spend a lot of time at home with my family. So I was always looking up to people like Marco Arment with their own iPhone apps, working on their own thing and enjoying it. I even traveled to WWDC 2016 to meet my independent heroes and idols. And I thought that one day I might also create an iOS app that would succeed in the App Store. I even created one. It was called Settle App, and Apple still keeps me sending around $150 a year collected from the purchases. But that's not enough to replace my salary, of course. Around 2014, I've been working on and off on another thing. At the university, we've developed mostly in Java, and I've come to like the fact that the Java compiler will point out errors in your code and wouldn't allow me to even run application with those fatal errors present. So for my day job, I was used to write code in PHP, but I missed this particular feature of the Java compiler. But I thought that it could definitely be written to provide checks like accessing an undefined variable or call to an undefined method, access to an undefined property, etc. Because at that time, PHP was and still is progressing a lot. So we already started writing type hints, and our code actually resembled Java code a lot with dependency injection and clean code and everything. So this was the initial motivation for me to create PHP Stand, and I released it exactly 4 years ago in 2016. But I had no plans of monetizing that because I just wanted it to exist because it would be useful to me, but I had no idea that it would be useful for someone else. And I would still dream of the mythical iOS app that would enable me to go independent, but almost unwittingly, almost without noticing, this other thing grew up and was picking up steam. And I also loved working on it. And it has come slowly, even without me realizing it. But right now, at the end of 2020, I'm able to say that developing open source software is my job. I'm master of my own time and destiny, and I'm free to decide what I want to be working on and when. And it's entirely mine. So I would like to tell you some of my experiences and principles that I use when developing open source software, mainly PHP Stand. And after that, I will focus on the monetization part. So most open source projects start because of a personal need. You have a problem and you solve it with a piece of code that you write. You shouldn't be afraid of reinventing the wheel because you can make something with a different spin than what already exists. At the point when I was writing PHP Stand, there was already Fan, P-H-A-N, but almost no one knew about it, and I thought that I could do a better job. And dogfooding is essential. So the thing that you created, you also need to use it by yourself if you want to come up with new ideas and continue making it better. If you're lucky, then other people will find it useful. You might notice that by looking at the download numbers, but most likely because of the increasing rate of open issues and maybe even pull requests. Having a successful open source project can be a curse, and some maintainers see it like that. You might have heard quotes like these from some maintainers. So for example, they say, people ask me to work for free, or people are mean because I have a different opinion, or I'm spending too much time on this project and it's not enough. But there are ways to mitigate these problems, and I will talk about them. Part of this is having the right mindset. So, for example, I think that number of issues of an open source project doesn't signal how buggy the project is. It just means that the project is popular. For example, Visual Studio Code is open source editor from Microsoft, and right now it has around 4,000 open issues on GitHub. So does it mean that Visual Studio Code is unusable? Does it mean that the developers are lazy? No, it's simply popular. People want the project to do more stuff when they like it, and they become hungry for more features. Bug reports and feature requests from other people should be just two of the data points when you're considering the future of the project, what you are going to be working on next. Personally, I keep a private to-do list that has around, last time I checked, it had around 500 or even more items of things that PHP Stand could do. And I continue to expand this list as new ideas come back to me. I review this list regularly and move things around based on how attractive and how easy it is to implement these ideas. And these are my guidelines, how to prioritize. You can divide all the ideas and feature requests and bug reports that you get into 4 groups based on 2 axes. One dimension is how difficult it is to implement these ideas. That's the vertical one. And the horizontal one is how you are sure about the benefits when the implementation is done. Which benefits the implementation will bring when it's done. So we have 4 groups. And the first one, when the thing is easy to implement and it will bring certain benefits, obvious benefits, it's a no-brainer. You should do this as the first thing when you have time to work on your project. Another group is are tasks that are hard to implement, but also have obvious benefits. These will take longer, but it's also worth implementing them. Another group, we now get to the orange area, are tasks that are easy to implement, but you are not sure about the benefits. You can do those, but it shouldn't be too much of a priority for you. And the last group, the red one, are ideas that are difficult to implement and have questionable benefits. And it's a completely dead volley that no one should go there. No one should be forced to implement such ideas, because you can always find some green ones instead of the orange ones and the red ones. So it's your project. Make sure that you have a roadmap, that you have a vision, and you don't have to make these public. You don't have to have a public roadmap, because this roadmap for you will constantly change direction as you come up with new and better ideas what to do next. But you shouldn't be forced to change your direction just because someone opened a feature request or a bug report. And it's important to uphold this, to keep to these principles, and you shouldn't say yes to every feature request. 1,000 no's for every yes. This is Apple's product strategy. This is a screenshot from their marketing video aimed at developers. You need to be sure that something is worth it and that it's the correct answer before implementing it. So if it's good enough for Apple, it should be good enough for you. So my point is that you shouldn't do exactly what people are asking for. You should wait for a pattern. You should wait until you have enough data points, enough feature requests for a thing before you implementing it. And you should wait to see what these feature requests have in common, because it's actually possible to satisfy 10 different feature requests in one big sweep if you give it some thought. You should also consider long-term impact of every change, so that the complexity of the project doesn't rise too much, so that you will still be able to maintain it long-term. But of course, I also fix reported bugs too, but I differentiate between things that I broke recently and bugs in recently added features. These I try to fix these instantly because they're my fault and I feel like it's a pressing need to fix them. And if a bug report isn't that easy to fix, I try to offer a workaround, which is pretty easy in PHP Stand, because you can configure your project to ignore almost any error or override inferred types with a PHP doc. And sometimes a new feature request or bug report lines up with my roadmap. So the user might be pleasantly surprised with how fast I fix their issue. But it's an exception, not a rule, because some users are not that lucky. What I want to say is that I try not to get too distracted with incoming issues. It might sound lazy, it might sound unfair or arrogant, but it's the only way to guarantee long-term sustainability of the project, which is actually in everyone's interest, even for those users that opened an issue 3 years ago and still haven't got fixed it. So what's actually nice about open source, about your own projects, is that it's actually easy to achieve low technical debt, or it's easy to reduce it, because you have no boss, you have no deadlines. Your code can be as nice as you want it to, but don't fall into a trap. You can't spend an infinite amount of time on code quality, because you also need to keep bringing value to your users. I really like release often mantra. So if you're finished with a bug fix or with a feature, single bug fix or single feature, or it might even be just a refactoring, why should you keep it to yourself? Why should you hoard? Why should you make batches of multiple changes and multiple features and releasing them all at once, only every few months? You can release them as often as you want, and the project will get better at a much faster pace because you will get feedback much faster. So because the actual usefulness of a feature might be different from what you think about it. So it's best to implement it at some smaller scale, and only if you get good feedback about it, you can then expand it to something bigger, which is actually what I talk about in this tweet. So this is a never-ending cycle. I think about a new feature, I do it on a small scale, I release it, I gather feedback from users, and then I improve it and expand on the feature iteratively in next releases. And I really like this cycle. I do it a lot, and on average, I release a new version of PHP Stand every week. But I don't have a set schedule. It just happens. It just happens like that. Okay. One more important thing to mention is that you shouldn't forget to take care of yourself, because open source can be challenging to your mental health if you don't protect yourself. The crowd is anonymous. Commenters don't understand there's a human on the receiving end when they write some mean comment. And you should realize that with a popular open source project, you are, for example, in a similar role as popular celebrities or YouTubers. You're on the spot, and anyone can send you a message. You can see what I mean if you search reading mean comments on YouTube, and you will know what I'm talking about. You should definitely watch some of these videos. So you shouldn't allow for them to get into your head, because opinions of other people are just noise, especially if you don't know them personally. So you should treat these opinions, these comments, just as some noise. And there's a paradox in all this, because if someone sends you a nice comment, if someone praises you for your work, it will not make your day. You might smile for a few minutes, but you will stop thinking about it. But if someone criticizes you, if someone sends you some mean comment, it will ruin your day, and you will not be able to stop thinking about it. And it might even wake you up at night. So you really shouldn't get affected by this. You should be arrogant in this way, and you shouldn't let other people to get into your head too much. It's the only manageable strategy of doing your work in public above a certain number of messages or people talking to you every day. And so this part was about how an open source project development looks like. And you might also realize that a lot of these advices, a lot of these pieces of advice apply to all projects, not just open source ones. So you might also apply them at your job. So for example, if you are working on a web development, if you are working on a web application and you don't release every day, you should think about how to change it, because that way you will get feedback from your users much faster, and you will be able to steer the direction of the project based on real needs from real users. So now we've made it to the money-making part of my talk. So why? Why should we make money with open source? For me, it's really motivating since the first dollar I earned, because it's a validation of your idea, and you can see somewhere far in the future that you might be able to justify giving more time working on your project, and it would make it better instead of working on it over nights and weekends after your real job. So when you start asking for money, the first month you will probably be able to buy a coffee with the sponsor money. After some time, you might be able to buy a lunch, and sometime after that, you suddenly are pushing a shopping cart throughout a grocery shop, and you just bought groceries for a full week, and the whole shopping cart was paid with open source money. So this is where I realized that I'm really grateful that my work on PHP Stand has paid for something real and tangible, and it was really nice, and it only grows from there. And the bad news is that just developing open source software is not enough to make a living. It's not just enough to write code, and you need to do something extra. Wait, what? I'm spending all this time writing code, and you are telling me that I need to do something more, something extra? Well, think of it this way. Tennis players do not just play tennis. They have sponsors and commitments. They have to shop somewhere. They need to take pictures with products in order to make money. Painters in the medieval age died of hunger if they started to be famous after they were dead. During their life, if they only concentrated on painting pictures, they died of hunger. So the successful painters who also become rich did something extra besides just painting pictures. On the internet, this can be compared, for example, to comic authors. So, for example, XKCD or the Oatmeal, you probably know at least these two. They publish comics on the internet for free. Does it remind you of something? Open source developers also offer things on the internet for free. But these comic authors also offer other things that you can pay for in order to make a living. They have some merch, some t-shirts or posters. They also write books that you can find in your bookstores, or you can order them online. And for example, the Oatmeal also started doing board games, table games. So if you want to be a paid open source developer, you need to start to have this mindset. The most straightforward monetization path is offering sponsorships. I've created a Patreon account after a month after I released PHP Stand. Patreon isn't that nice? Isn't that nice for this purpose? Because it doesn't focus on software developers, but it's usable for this purpose. I wouldn't give too much effort into setting the right tiers and giving extra perks for your sponsors, because it doesn't yield much extra revenue in our case, from my experience. And after some time, when I was active on Patreon, GitHub started doing GitHub sponsors. And GitHub sponsors should actually be your first choice, because unlike Patreon, GitHub doesn't take any fees. So you get 100% of your proceeds. And additionally, the GitHub matching fund is doubling the sponsorships for the first 12 months, for the first $5,000. So if someone gives you $100 a month, then GitHub/Microsoft, the owner of GitHub, gives you 100 more until the $5,000 limit for the first year. So since GitHub is the natural home for open source software, it makes a lot of sense opting into GitHub sponsors. Before the talk, I checked, and Brazil isn't on the list of supported countries, but there's a way around it. I also started using GitHub sponsors before the Czech Republic was officially supported. And the actual issue was with the national currency, because GitHub didn't support payouts in Czech koruna. But if you somehow manage to create an international bank account for a supported currency like US dollars or euros through some fintech company like Revolut or similar, you can contact GitHub support and tell them that you have a bank account in supported currency, and they will enable GitHub sponsors for you so you can join the program. Besides GitHub sponsors, which is aimed at individual developers, you can also offer sponsorships of releases. I realized this because I liked writing articles about major releases to sum up new features. And these articles were visited by website users a lot. So I realized that I could probably mention a company or two inside these articles, and I started advertising this. And you can have one-off sponsor for a price that would make sense to you, given the audience you have. And for the sponsorship, I mentioned the sponsor in the release article and in the release notes on GitHub, and I also thank them on Twitter. Another option is that I offer a logo placement in the README for a monthly fee. So some companies are willing to pay basically also for advertisement. An example of an open source project that is very successful in this is the JavaScript framework Vue, Vue, because they are also offering logo, I think, on their homepage and in the README, and it's making the creator quite a sizable salary. But I have bad news for you again, because asking for sponsors is not enough. It's a good start, and it's possible to get to the level of weekly grocery shopping money with sponsors, but you have to realize that it takes a special kind of person that will pay for something that they can get and others are getting for free. So in order to make more money with open source, you need to offer something in return, something irresistible and necessary for someone's productivity. It might also sound harsh, but I often compare the required mindset to a mindset of developers of free-to-play games. Of course, free-to-play is the biggest lie in the universe. You download a game for free, and the developers offer it for free so that they can get players in the door, but they make you pay to remove inconveniences and, for example, speed up gameplay. And I see open source in a similar way. For me, open source is a form of audience building for your business. So you should treat it like that. Of course, I'm not telling you to cripple your project in nefarious ways, but you don't have to give everything that you create for free. You can offer something extra, some paid functionality to boost users' productivity, for example. So this is what I try to do with PHP Stand. In September this year, I released PHP Stand Pro. It's a paid add-on on top of PHP Stand that shows you the errors that PHP Stand finds in a beautiful interactive web UI that you launch from your command line when running PHP Stand. And it also offers automatic fixes of found errors. So the initial release that I did in September met my expectations. My goal was to replace the missing revenue from GitHub matching fund, which I already depleted. But I admit also there's a lot of work ahead of me because I have to catch up years of PHP Stand development to be able to offer automatic fixes of all reported errors. And I also plan to develop editor plugins, for example, for Visual Studio Code and PHP Storm, so that people don't have to have this open browser window on their desktop. So this was an example of a paid add-on. Another example is another way to monetize. You can offer adjacent services. And a great example of this is Laravel Forge. It made Taylor Otwell, which is a creator of Laravel, millions of dollars. He developed and offers Laravel framework for free. But if you want to host your Laravel-based websites, Laravel Forge is the easiest choice because you can get running just with a few clicks. You can bring your own virtual server from provider of choice, and Forge sets it up to run PHP and relational database like MySQL or Postgres really easily. And my point in all this is that when you are working on something new, you should already have monetization in mind, even before releasing the project. It's better if the monetization is built in from day one, instead of an afterthought. Well, of course, everyone will make the mistake of not having a monetization plan for the first project they do, including me. I didn't have this plan when I was starting PHP Stand. Another option is to provide workshops on using your project. It can be a nice extra income, but you can't rely on that because in my case, it only happens a few times a year on conferences. And giving workshops, giving personal one-on-one time also violates one of the principles that actually make software development attractive. Because when you create and release something, it works for you even if you are away from the keyboard. It's not exactly passive income because you still need to work to develop it and improve it. And it's actually the part that I like, to be creating something. But the money that you are making is decoupled from the time spent. So if you manage to get some monthly income with your project, you can get some time off and still receive the same income. Of course, over the long term, the income would decrease as your project would languish if you weren't devoting any more time on it. And if you are spending time on improving your project instead of giving workshops for a group for 10 people, the impact is also higher, because if you give a workshop for a certain group of people, you only made life better for those 10 people, hopefully at least 10 people. But if you release a new version of your software, it will eventually reach all of your users, and the impact of your time spent is much higher. You can also create educational content like a book or a screencast. This is, for example, what Caleb Porzio is doing, and GitHub sponsors actually allowed him to leave his day job to fully focus on open source and other endeavors. He is widely successful with this. I really like this comparison chart. And it charts multiple forms of self-employment income. So the green line are info products similar to books or screencasts. So you are working on something, the line is near 0, and then it shoots up as you release the thing, and many people are hopefully a lot of people pay for this as a one-time payment, and then it decreases over time as you saturate your possible audience for this content. Then you release something new, it spikes up again and decreases again. So this is that was the green line. On the other hand, the red line is product as a service, and this is how it looks like in form of recurring payments, which can be monthly or once a year, and you have a slow ramp up because in the beginning, not many people know about your product, and you need to prove to them that it's going to be successful, it's going to be useful in their life, and successful to improve their life and their productivity. And if you develop it for long enough, it might reach up really high because the income is additive as more and more people pay for it every month. And the last line, the blue line, is basically you as a service. So you spend some time, for example, helping someone with something or consulting a problem, but you can only sell your time. You can only have 24 hours a day, and you need to sleep, etc. So this actually doesn't scale, and it can never grow higher than a certain threshold. So also, you shouldn't have only a single bet. That's why I'm talking about so many options, and I actually do all of them on in some ratio. And you should mix them together because the diverse revenue streams actually create a job safety for you. You shouldn't have all of your bets in a single bucket. So one point, we are getting near to the end. One point of view that you can have after my talk is that all of this is just for so-called celebrity developers, which already have a huge following. And they're the only ones which can succeed in making money from open source. But that's a wrong view. That's a wrong way to look at it, because what shouldn't be news to you is that everyone started from 0. Everyone can actually grow some audience if given enough time. And you are probably familiar with this saying: the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So the takeaway from my talk should be that you should start building an audience by releasing some interesting software, by writing articles, by tweeting about interesting stuff, about be active on Reddit, and most importantly, you should be consistent. You should show up regularly and work on your project in regular intervals, and your work will bear fruit given enough time. Okay, so that's all from me today. I want to thank you very much for your attention, and now is the time for questions. So I will check out the chat to see what you are writing there. I will wait for your questions.
Pessoal, vamos lá. Vamos aproveitar o tempo que nós temos aqui com o Ondřej. Lembrando também, como eu comentei com vocês na palestra da Érica, as colocações de vocês são importantes, elas são gravadas junto com o chat, então sintam-se à vontade para não apenas fazer perguntas, mas colocações também. We have a first question from Anna. Ondřej, did you see it?
I see. What's the next big thing for PHP Stand? So I would have to go through the 500 items I have in my to-do list, but I actually aggregate them in a much smaller to-do list. That's that when they are grouped by some topics. The next big thing is probably PHP Stand 1.0, which is going to be first release that doesn't start with 0, obviously, but I don't actually plan to change my workflow too much after 1.0 because the project is already pretty stable, and I was releasing one major version, major meaning that the number after 0 only increases. So for example, 0.10, 0.11, 0.12, this I call major version. And for some time, I was already releasing only one major version a year. So this isn't going to be much of a change. And next year, which is actually responding to your other remark, Anna, where do I swipe my card for auto fixes, is that I'm going to be improving PHP Stand Pro. And because right now the auto fixes are in an early access. There's not many of them, but I plan to work on them to actually catch up with the library of the errors that PHP Stand already reports. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on next year. But I don't want to sound like that I only want to focus on the paid part, because if you actually check out my article about PHP Stand Pro, I'm going to put it up here on my screen. I'm talking about the fact that during development of PHP Stand Pro, I improved the open source part of PHP Stand by a lot. So some of the features that you are enjoying in the free version were actually made because they make the PHP Stand Pro version better. So for example, I don't know where it is in this article. Yeah, so for example, if you are enjoying result cache, if you are enjoying result cache, which makes the analysis much faster, if you are enjoying analysis in multiple threads, if you are enjoying static reflection, these were all made in the anticipation of PHP Stand Pro. So this is also what I plan to continue to do, because the development of open source PHP Stand and PHP Stand Pro go hand in hand. So when improving PHP Stand Pro, I would also expect similar improvements in PHP Stand itself. If you want to know about some other features that I want to do, so for example, I want to be fixing a lot of bugs, because I have some ideas. I have some ideas in mind. So for example, if you write some code that looks like this, you create conditionally a variable, and when you repeat the same condition, PHP Stand doesn't know that the variable will already exist, because it's not smart in that way. Right now, what you have to do is to ask a different condition, and then PHP Stand will stop complaining. So this feature I call this feature dependent types, and this is what I want to focus on in the short term. And actually, when I was procrastinating on preparing this talk, I was working on this. So I hope that this is something that you can look forward to in the short term. And I have a lot more ideas how to improve PHP Stand. So I hope that this answers your question. Okay, thank you.
We have a question about contributing to PHP Stand.
I see. So the question is, how can I make small contributions like a newbie in open source? So if you like some project and you don't know where to start, basic way to orient yourself around a project is to start looking for strings. So for example, in the case of PHP Stand, if you find some bug related to an error, if you want to fix some bug around that a variable might not be defined, I would probably start by searching for this string in a code base. That will tell you what kind of change you need to make in order to do something around this specific error. Another way of orienting yourself around the project is to look at release notes, is to look at what kind of issues people have, is to look at what the creator is committing to the main branch. And this way you will actually, given enough time, you will actually find how to make changes to the project that make sense. So I try to do a good work of this in PHP Stand. So when I am releasing a new version, I am dutifully linking all the solved issues and actually linking how I fixed them. So if you read release notes of a few versions, you will get the idea of how specific things are fixed. And then you can dive into the code and start trying fixing some things yourself. And where to start? Most projects usually have some useful labels or milestones. So for example, some projects have a label called good first issue. I have a milestone called easy fixes, and this list consists of issues that I expect to be easy to fix. So it should take no more than 50 lines to fix all these issues. Of course, I can be wrong. And actually, what I like, if someone wants to contribute, it's best to contact me, so I can probably give them some advice about how to approach the solution, so that they don't spend a lot of time on their own figuring out how to fix a problem. So it's best to first ask a question, how to approach something before sending a huge pull request. Okay, does it answer your question? Hopefully. All right, so another question is, was there a time when you considered abandoning open source? If so, how was it and how did you overcome? Well, it wasn't that bad for me. It never was that bad for me, but I'm probably quite good about taking breaks. So probably because something else takes my attention, I can focus on some different thing, and then get back and pick up where I left off. But I was never pondering that I would abandon open source. As I was talking about in my keynote talk, it's about having the right mindset and don't care about people that are mean to you. Just take your time, do what you want to work on, and you should never be so close to considering abandoning open source if you have the right mindset and take a sustainable approach to the development. Okay, so is there any other question? Okay, I don't see any.
Pessoal, últimos minutos aí para aproveitar para fazer uma pergunta para o Ondřej. Ninguém? Thank you so much, Ondřej, for being here with us. And I'll just ask you, you, Anna, and Erica, I'm not sure if she's here, but to wait for a few seconds. Brazil is well known for being a warm and welcoming country, and I wish to give you all of that. So if you can wait just a second. Pessoal, por gentileza, as regras junto.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, my microphone was on mute. Silly. We are leaving for our lunch recess, and if you want to join us later for another talks and stuff, we'll be delighted to have you all. Thank you again, all so much. Pessoal, nós vamos proceder agora para o nosso intervalo de almoço, tá? E depois à tarde retornamos com a programação normal, 14 horas. Às 14 horas retornamos à programação normal do evento. Lembrando, antes que todos vocês fujam correndo, lembrando que hoje nós temos a nossa cerimônia de encerramento, tá? Onde não apenas teremos sorteio de brindes, mas também nós vamos contar para vocês duas novidades sensacionais sobre o mercado de eventos. Então, por gentileza, não percam, ok? Obrigado, thank you all, muito obrigado, e I'll see you all later, hopefully.
Have a nice
Okay.
weekend.
Have a nice weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Obrigado,
Bye.
pessoal. Vejo vocês mais tarde. Valeu.